Immigrant Nation. Today on the Immigrant Pod, we are hosting what most of us would consider a true literally icon and cultural provocateur. Andrei Codrescu, a first-generation immigrant, was born in Sibiu, Romania. Andrei's journey from an aspiring poet behind the Iron Curtain to an award-winning American writer, NPR commentator, a filmmaker is nothing short of extraordinary. A Peabody Award winner, National Book Award winner, a fearless voice in journalism, he has made an indelible mark on literature and media. Andrei is described by his friend Elona Noon as dazzling, funny, principled, and a master of adventure. Andrei embodies the immigrant spirit, turning every challenge into art and every moment into a story. Welcome, Andrei. So, dazzling, funny, principled, and a master of adventure sounds like a charming Casanova. But these are misleading or insinuating adjectives. What is your immigration experience?
Well, it's my experience leaving Romania was inspiring, let's put it this way, because I was 19 years old. And when you're 19 and you leave whatever place, you'll be, your ears are open, your eyes are open, you receive everything from your new place. And so I came from a Romania that was very impoverished and that was very poor. And there were nothing to look at around you very much. There are the portraits of the 5 members of the Central Committee of the Communist Party with their triple chins and their fearsome looking eyes. And that was about it in the way of our television was none. The dictator put up in Romania for 4 hours, he made speech. And so, leaving that and going into a world that was multicolored, that had advertisements and things that had, something I've never seen before really inspired me. And then when I came to America, I came to Detroit with my mother. And Detroit was at that time in a state of revolt, like most of the United States. There were great demonstrations against the war in Vietnam. There are tanks on the National Guard and the Airborne on Woodward Avenue. There was a 6 o'clock curfew. And within that, I was looking for people, for the poets. And I found them. And they were my generation. And we were a very questing generation. We looked at everything. So for me, it was both an education and of a lot of struggle for basic, like places to sleep and stuff to eat. I don't even remember what I ate for 19 years in Romania because I was trying to, a friend of mine, to figure out what we had. We settled on sort of bread and jam and butter about the thing, and so even that experience was new. So, yeah.
Yeah, so you left Romania in 1965 after Israel literally paid for your freedom, Mama. From what we've gathered, the Israeli government paid for your freedom for you and your mom. What does it feel like knowing you had a price tag on you? Did that shape you and how you saw the world afterwards?
That's a good question. I didn't know this for a long time. This was a secret deal that Israel and Romania had, and also a deal that Romania's dictator Ceausescu had with West Germany. So ethnic Germans and Jews who lived in Romania, Israel and West Germany bought our freedom, but we didn't know anything about it. I found this out from a book called The Sale of the Jews, and I realized that the Israeli government paid $2,000 for me and $2,000 for my mother, and that is only because we hadn't gone to college. If we had gone to college, it would have been 4 times. But most people, when they hear about it, they say, well, you were bought and sold. Well, in a way, yes, but another way you can put it is that Israel bought our freedom, because in Romania, certainly that was not the case, and I felt sorry for a lot of my friends, and Romanians couldn't live that way. And some of them tried to escape because all the guns at the borders were pointed into the country, not outside of it. They're not defending themselves, they're keeping people in. The Romania was at the time a big camp where prisoners.
So, your situation before you left Romania was a horrific situation, and that's many, many years ago. And while we may talking about past history for Romania, what that is considered your personal experience. In today's world, we have over 20 countries across the globe that find yourself in similar situations. For example, you have the paused war between Israel and Palestine. You have the cultural or terrorist takeover of Haiti by street gangs. You have the Republic of Congo and Zaire fighting over minerals. You have Russia and Ukraine, who have been in conflict for over 3 years. These are some of the reasons why people find themselves as migrants. You arrived in the US in 1966, settling first in Detroit. Be honest. Was America everything you had imagined, or did the reality hit you differently?
Oh, it was very different. I was tremendously disappointed when I came here because, I couldn't find any people, for one thing. I said, what is the center of town? And there was no center. There was a downtown that emptied at 6 o'clock. I found I didn't have friends. And I didn't find any work when it was a hard time. What was disappointing too was the food. America was very boring at the time I came.
America had not experienced the vast experience of food that we do today from multiple sources of immigration.
Exactly. No, I mean, it was a mashed potatoes and hamburger world, and but that was a little more than the jam and bread we had back in Romania. So, but that wasn't really my concern. My concern was really finding people and friends. And I was 19 years old. I had a lot of things to tell to girls. So.
Very interesting. So, you stepped into America counterculture in the late 60s, mingling with the likes of Allen Ginsberg and Ted Berrigan. What was it about that era that made you feel at home, or did you never quite settle or feel at home?
Well, I did feel at home with the poets, with the counterculture. I went to New York almost immediately after Detroit and met Allen Ginsberg, and I met Ted Berrigan, and these were people who were revolting against the status quo. They were against the war. They were against the police state that was always
the policing state of the 1960s. Is there any comparison to 2025?
Yeah, I think in 2025 we have a much worse surveillance state that looks for everything we do. I mean, in the 60s it was a hit and miss thing. You fell into that terrible world. But now I think it is much worse, and it is worse in a way that we don't quite feel, because the surveillance is not big cameras and that sort of equipment. Everything is being I don't think there's any private life that have this. I think I saw the former head of the CIA put masking tape on the photo lens of his camera. I think privacy just does not exist, and that way it is a very different world.
That is very interesting. So Many immigrants find themselves lost in translation. They speak of feeling of having a feeling of displacement that never fully goes away. After decades in the U.S., do you feel American or just like a Romanian who never quite went back?
Well, I do feel American in my writing, and but I have been back to Romania to cover the 1989 fall of the regime for National Public Radio and ABC News. And slowly I found my old friends and I made new friends, and I relearned the language. And so I feel that I am bilingual and at home in both places. But being a poet, you already don't quite feel that you are in this world. You have to find your way through another tentacular mechanism to the world. So I've never felt at home. I felt, at home anywhere, but I feel home everywhere. I lived in Baltimore, I lived in San Francisco, I lived in New York, in the Ozarks, on the border of Arkansas and Missouri, a wilderness really. The closest store was an hour away. So, I like these circumstances because they challenge that strangeness, the foreign feeling of being in a place that you have to learn and you have to adapt to and you have to make it yours.
Of course. So you are an immigrant writer, a satirist, if I may really put it that way. Um, uh, the Your poetry book, License to Carry a Gun, won the Big Table Poetry Award, a pretty ironic title for an immigrant. Were you already feeling dangerous in terms of your impact in society in America, or you feeling dangerous in terms of what American culture was looking like for you?
Oh, definitely. I felt both that I was dangerous and that I was hoping to be dangerous. Let's put it this way. Um, when I was teaching, I gave my students an assignment: write a poem to be arrested for. None of them could quite do it, So, but I wasn't doing it for that reason. I was doing it reacting to the world around me, and the world around me seemed divided in people who wanted to make war, the people who were against it, and not just that, but we had a generational divide that was quite serious and visible. And so what I was writing was from the point of view of people on the other side of the official policy of the government.
Your work often blends sharp satire with deep intellectualism. Do you feel America today is taking itself too seriously or not serious enough?
I think both are true. I think that the people who are in power today are deliberately misleading for their own purposes. That's on the one hand, and I think that the people who put them there, the electorate, does not take itself serious enough, because if they had, those people wouldn't be there. So, yeah.
How does immigrants that are in America today, how should they perceive themselves and how should they conduct themselves in the marketplace to become winners or challenge the status quo?
Well, there have been several generations since I came here, and I heard one of your guests the other day, a wonderful and articulate entrepreneur who talked about the companies that he had founded and how being an immigrant made him to thrive better, and he was successful. And so I think that there is a generation now that understands America from another place, from a place of the technology, and from a place of global knowledge that they have connected through the internet, and so they are much more positive in their outlook, and it is possible for them to succeed financially, and in whatever way. I wouldn't say the poets, because poetry is not even in that world, but there are I think there are reasons to be an optimist. Now, the only problem is in the immigration policies, this nightmare that has been created by the anti-immigration speeches of the president and his entourage, and these are dangerous not to the well-being of. It's dangerous to the well-being of everyone, every immigrant. But that in a way, knowledgeable, technically skilled people cannot be stopped, because, as your guest said, it is global now. So how can you put frontiers and borders, knowledge and ambition?
That is the beauty of what the world has become today, which is a global village. We travel faster, we speak immediately, we leave a lasting impact in the globe and the marketplace. As a member of the Fourth Estate, a regular NPR commentator, and a poet for more than 30 years, you did mainstream media. Let me say, you provided a different perspective when it came to your media work. How should immigrants apply themselves today when it comes to social media?
Well, when I started at the National Public Radio, it was not mainstream media. It still had some of the vigor of youth and the opposition stance. Yeah, it started during Watergate, and so, but I joined 2 years later, and even in that organization, I was somewhat of an outside voice. But NPR had the good sense, I guess, of trying to get people with different perspectives on there. And so I was in a very different environment where we had a lot of press. There were news outlets everywhere. Now, all the large media organizations, which the NPR became as well, a very big, they had 6 million listeners, so now when I started, they have 28 million now. So it is a completely different place. But now there is an effort to quash the media, and this is extremely dangerous. And but the fact that almost everyone has a platform if they want it, and if they are like you do, it's a podcast. So people listen and they get their sources for the news from other places, and so it is more varied. At the same time, you have more disinformation, and you don't have the quality of to find that quality, you have to do it yourself. It's more difficult than just looking at TV or listening to the radio.
Part of what I've noticed to be Mr. Trump's strategy is attacking the opposing media. And I think it works very well because it seems like he intimidates the opposing media. You covered the 1989 Romanian Revolution for NPR. And I asked this question because I think there's a relationship of your experience in 1989 for Nightline and what's happening today. Was it personal revenge against a country that once sold you off, or just journalistic curiosity?
Well, it was more than journalistic curiosity. It was just simply curiosity, because I hadn't gone back for 25 years, so I wanted to hear the language. I found the familiar smells. I would visit what relatives I had left, and I looked for my friends. And so I was pretending to be a journalist as much as I could. And I served as a translator, and I did write stories there. But my intentions were really to reconnect with my childhood and my adolescence. And so, but it was, you know, it was a world that appeared to be to transform itself from a dictatorship into a world with free press and entrepreneurship, but it was not. It was for a long time, for at least 20 years, until now, really, it was still in the hands of this secret police of various kinds of old regime functionaries. And so corruption was great, and still is. Until Romania joined Europe, the EU and NATO, it was a country that you could buy and sell anything. Now it is part of Europe, and they are trying to change those old habits. But when I went there, they were on the streets. It was, we were in an ABC News car, and we went through a tunnel, and there was gunfire, and so I sank down in the car, and my driver, who was unflappable, said, well, they saw our ABC News sticker, and so on the way back, took it off.
Very interesting. So, you became a U.S. citizen in 1981, and I want us to talk about absurdities of citizenship, right? In a world where a lot has changed, in places where social media has changed how we do things, did you feel like gaining something or losing something when you became a United States citizen?
Well, I came here on a refugee passport, which was called then a Nansen passport, which was a white little booklet that allowed you to stay in America. Then I got a green card, which was a residency visa, and then I tried to, it should have been 5 years to get my citizenship, but it took 10. And the reasons were various and absurd. And when the ceremony came, I was the oldest, immigrant to actually get U.S. citizenship. And then, ironically, when I made a film about a journey through America, I was asked to speak to a group of immigrants at the ceremony in New York. And behind me were all the then called INS, now ICE officials. And I gave a talk that was not at all like, the boring cliche-filled thing that your basic judge did before missing everybody. I said, you can be an American and keep your religion, your food, your everything. And, the only thing is that you must respect the Constitution. That was about it. And so to me, it was not, a terribly life-changing experience. It was, I was angry actually that I couldn't even do it in the normal fashion, the normal time. So, no, it didn't change anything. And, I've been writing quite a bit about the absurdity of borders. And in Europe now, the Romanians finally, were able to travel. And as soon as they did, they just went everywhere, and they go everywhere. And, it is a world that doesn't need, and, the border doesn't, it's not geographical. The border is everywhere. The border goes through the middle of every city in America. This is, there are people now who, for a lot of people crossing the border from Mexico, for instance, was on to the other side, and that was the done deal. Then, not having a paper, certainly, was not really a terrible crime. Yeah.
So we're still on the absurdities. If you had a choice between being remembered as a Romanian writer or an American writer, which would it be, or is it a question, or is the question itself meaningless and absurd?
Yeah, the question is, to me, for me, it's pretty, odd, because I don't think of myself as an American writer or as a Romanian writer. I'm both. When I started writing again in Romanian, and most of my work is English, so in American English. So, but this idea of now I read poems written in English by Romanians who've never been to any English-speaking country. I read writers from everywhere in English, and I would love to. I read them in Spanish. That's about the extent of it for me. But I don't. The idea of being an observer, a writer, somebody who thinks that you can think about anything, anywhere. It is not something that is confined, to that kind of identity.
Studying you, I found you very interesting because you've lived through, let me see, communism, capitalism, counterculture, and the new digital age. So looking at all these systems and looking at where we are today and what your imagination of what America should look like, or what an American immigrant experience should look like. How should immigrants prepare themselves or align themselves with the cultures of the places they have moved into, and if it's in America, with the capitalistic mentality?
It's a very good question. I would call this particular age digital feudalism. But yes, I think, and I always said that, you should not, you should make your differences more evident and more interesting and more pronounced, rather than becoming whatever of an American, or you should stress your differences. And even my accent, which I still have after all these years, my mother used to say, "Now roll those R's harder, you're gonna make more of it than because to conform is really difficult, but to be someone that is listened to or agreed or disagreed with, there is nothing to. What is interesting about a person really is how different they are. What in the way that their culture and their language has shaped them, and so that's a gift that we give the locals. Not the Americans. Americans particular, because this is a nation of immigrants. Everything in New York, they still talk like 1912 Bukovina. You can still hear those notes. And so they speak 147 languages in Queens, and that is a big gift, and that is why America was vital and why it was the capital of the 20th century. Because that initiative and that newness and that all that enriched the place.
Mr. Codrescu, if you were 19 years old today, with the knowledge you have today, what are some of the principles you would impact on the 19-year-old you?
Well, a 19-year-old now would probably emigrate with some knowledge of the language, because they've all watched Animal Planet and Disney, and they will have that, and they will have other knowledge that comes via the internet, and I think they'll be somewhat more prepared, but they would have the same problem I did, which is to be awkward, to be young, and really the only thing I would advise them to do is study and to go to educate themselves and find like-minded people to be with, a community that not necessarily from the same place they are, but a community that's connected by interest.
So I don't want to lose your perspective there because that's really important. Why is it ultimately important for anyone who want to pursue life relentlessly associate themselves with a community of like-minded individuals?
Well, because ultimately the result of your uh, efforts will be to explore and to find out, to take further what you know, and being with people who are interested in the same things will give rise to ideas, will really enlarge what you know. Now there is a Romanian community here. Yeah, I have some of my friends are from that community, but most of my friends are poets and writers. Some of them are New Yorkers, and some of them are live somewhere else, and some of them are immigrants like myself. I have good friends who's from Serbia, and they're different people, but we all have the same interest in discovery.
So you mentioned continual education. So why is continuous education important in today's society, and how should we pursue it?
That's a hard question for me because I think now you cannot get a job, for instance, if you had not been to a college or to a program. When I came, that was not what I wanted to do, and I never did go to college. And I found that I started teaching college because I had published a book, and that was considered to be some kind of equivalent of an academic degree. But now I don't think it is possible to do that because there are so many people that compete for limited resources.
So that's a scary thought. Thinking about limited resources. I mean, the world's population continues to grow. We're somewhere approaching 8 billion people. We live longer, better lives. We have fewer wars compared to what it used to be. We have been able to navigate most diseases, and so we're living longer. And so, based on your experience, diverse experience, for those who are immigrating in new countries, how should they start to prepare, and how should they approach the challenges that they will face daily?
Mm-hmm. Well, it is absolutely a known fact that most universities take students from everywhere because they are usually better prepared than students educated in the elementary or secondary education in the United States. Even in communism, I went to high school. My high school, I finished it as the equivalent of 2 years of community college. I'm sure of it. I learned quite a few things, and I think the education, immigrants are both more motivated because usually they're of their families who make them try and excel, and because of their own interests and ambitions, and they do go to now. Recently with the kind of terrifying policies of this administration, a lot of teachers are afraid, students are afraid. In my day, teachers were afraid because they could only teach what the ideological angle that was given to them in the textbooks. But something similar is happening here. So book censorship of science, all sorts of things that we're really proud of. It's about 5 minutes ago. Seems like the world has changed suddenly, and yeah, it has. And it's something that I'm ready to fight.
The globe has changed quite radically. It's faster than it used to be. How do we get to a place where we slow ourselves down? That way we're not missing the current moment, what's going on in our lives. we're slow enough to appreciate the things surrounding us.
That's probably the most difficult thing to do in this environment, because the news is relentless. The competition is great, and our attention is divided by all sorts of things, and so it is hard. And I would just say a meditative practice is good. Place, going to the country with the trees is good. And I moved from a wilderness where I lived for 7 years to New York, where there are as many people as there were trees where I used to live. And I look at them in a sense as nature. Everything is nature. But when I lived in the woods, I did have that equanimity, that kind of meditative space where I could slow the world down and I could turn on the media when I wanted to. But now I can't, and it's okay, because I'm being called to I don't know what, but the right thing.
You slow down, you pace yourself to have the capability to see your surrounding space. To get to that point, you suggest that meditation may be a way out or a way in. Let's talk about spirituality and what contribution spirituality plays in any human being's life, and especially for those migrants that find themselves immigrated to certain places across the globe, lost in translation.
That is a very good and serious question. And, my son is a spiritual person. He spends time in India. He's done various kinds of quests. I'm less inclined in that way, but I do believe that occasionally when you stop, you realize that you are in a universe that is more alive than than you think. Everything around you is animated by something. And I think that power, that force is, it somehow suits me to know that. I don't practice any religious or, rituals. I mean, I do meditate, I do some things like that, but mainly for health, not to seek or appeal to. But on the other hand, I think that being a poet, you have channels open in your brain that various things come to you that are not exactly things you thought of. They seem to come from other places. That they're wiser than I am, and but I believe that people who who are spiritual and who do follow certain practices are good people. For the most part. Now, unless they are, parts of those mega churches in Texas where they send you to hell if you don't pay up. Not so much spiritual as
Fantastic. Thank you. I sit down with immigrants and I find that most immigrants, when they're new in their new immigrated societies, it doesn't matter if they migrated from Africa to France, or they migrated from France to America, or they migrated from Mexico to America, or they migrated from America to Israel. When I speak to these people in their early years, most of them seem to be a little bit timid. And part of the timidity comes with their cultural associations and respect, and also their curiosity to take the low road so that they can learn and be able to marry into the societies that they have migrated to. Why is it necessary for personal confidence to be projected immediately rather than later as an immigrant?
Well, that is that depends, I think, on the age of the immigrant. Because when I was 19, I projected confidence because I was so insecure. So I had to, to talk a little louder than I should have, probably, because I came from a country where everything was whispered if it was real. But here I could speak as loud as I could, and I think I did. And but if you are older, you are more cautious and perhaps more respectful and more timid, as you said. But I really can't speak. I don't know. It's you. I'm sure you.
Let's talk about your work, right? You have very interesting titles for your poems and books, but if you can be a little bit self-introspective and look at yourself, what are some of the works that you've put out there that you think would be profound for society?
Well, it's a very good question. I've written essays about technology and language, and I think those books are still very valid. I wrote a book called The Post-Human Dada Guide, which Lenin said the subtitle is Dada and Lenin Play Chess. And it's a book about, ostensibly about the Dada movement. It's a book about language and technology. And I wrote a book called The Disappearance of the Outside, because it seemed to me that the outside is the idea of both nature and nonconformism was quickly disappearing under the weight of technology and the demands of society. And that book, I think, will work. And then I wrote a beautiful book called Whatever Gets You Through the Night, a story of Scheherazade. And it's a story from the 1001 Nights that I took, and I wrote about both as a appreciator, as a new story. And I really enjoyed writing that. And so it will be okay.
So what is a skill required not just to be a proficient author, but somebody who wants to determine their future?
Well, now we do have quite a lot more helps than I did, because I started writing by hand, with my pen, the way I learned in school. And then my next technology was the typewriter, and I already felt like I was in front of a public when because it seemed to be straighten up, and it seemed like somebody was listening. Then, after that came the computer, changed everything about writing, because suddenly the page had no end. You could keep on going. I lost the end of the page and the rhythm of the sentence, so that changed my writing. And so now we have artificial intelligence to write it for you, which, pretty horrendous idea as far as I'm concerned, because it try and black everything, instead of more interesting and more vivid. But the fact that all this technology exists to help us, it would make it easier to express what you want to say, or what you could or wouldn't be allowed to say. I think that it's a good time for a young writer. Marketing it, because nobody, our attention spans are those kids, so reading a real problem.
I believe we still have an opportunity for creativity in this world, right? I think the human mind is such a unique object, experience, that there is nothing that can replace the creativity of a human mind. Yes, we can take technology and use technology to enhance our thinking capacity and our creativity, but ultimately our creativity still remains the same. There is not a single entity, as far as I'm concerned, out there that can compete with the genius of what the human mind can be. Mr. Andrei, it's been such a pleasure having this conversation with you and chatting with you. I want to be very respectful of you and your time. Please tell us where our listeners can get your books or they can have conversations with you on social media.
Well, Codrescu.com, Codrescu.com. That's my website. I have a Substack, which is Andrei Codrescu Substack, and I have a book of poems coming out called How to Live Under Fascism, which is coming out at the end of March. It'll be found on Amazon.
So, immigrants across the globe. Today we have been speaking to Andrei. In the immigrant part, we have had the pleasure of speaking with true literally icon and cultural provocateur Andrei Codrescu, a first-generation immigrant, was born in Sibiu, Romania. Andrei's journey from an aspiring poet behind the Iron Curtain to an award-winning American writer, NPR commentator, a filmmaker is nothing short of extraordinary. A Peabody Award winner, National Book Award nominee, and fearless voice in journalism. He has made an indelible mark in literature and media. Andrei, please tell us one more time where we can find you on social media.
Thank you. Yes, my website is Codrescu.com, Codrescu.com, and I have a Substack, just Andrei Codrescu, and I have a new. I write occasional what used to be tweets, but I use Facebook and Blue Sky.
Fantastic. Before we sign off, give us a brief synopsis of what you're working on now.
Well, I just finished a novel called Meat from the Gold Rush, which is a novel about New York and California and cannibalism. And it's a book, it's almost an essay about history, really, about how history is like the worm Ouroboros that eats its own self and over. And it is about the history I've known and maybe other history. And that's what I'm working on, and just poetry, which is still the only reason I'm standing in front of a keyboard at all, or, even when I walk, I'm thinking, well, I stop in the middle of the street and the cars honk, and I write something on my iPhone.
Interesting. Very interesting. Thank you. Immigrants, that's a wrap for the pod today. Enjoy the rest of your day. Andrei, thank you for making the time for us, and welcome again to the Immigrant Pod.
My pleasure. It was great talking to you.
Thank you so very much. Let's talk soon.
Okay.